performance anxiety and excitement present themselves physiologically almost in the identical way. If our preparation was really good, then I can tell you right now, physiologically, you're experiencing excitement. If you have not prepared well, I'm sorry, well, then you have every right to feel anxiety.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Chris here from Aegis Leadership, and welcome to the Fireside Podcast. Today on the show, we've got Mark Zimmermann. Mark is a performance and mental skills coach. He's also a keynote speaker, and he's an author, amongst many other things. So, Mark, thanks very much for coming on.
Chris, it's great to be on the show. Thank you for inviting me.
All good. So I'm keen just to dive straight into it. For you, what does mental toughness actually mean in a high-performance setting?
Look, that's a really interesting question to start off with. Most athletes get to a sort of professional or semi-professional level and they believe that they have this mental toughness. And it's only when I start to ask them how they built their mental strength and mental fitness do they actually start to realize that there's two stages before reaching mental toughness. And those are the two stages I've just referenced, fitness and strength. And quite often they struggle to answer that question, which is part of the reason why high performance athletes and leaders in corporate environments come to speak to me, because they themselves are not sure really of what mental toughness is. Most people automatically assume you have to be super resilient and have that gritty edge to you to be able to be mentally tough. And in part, I agree with that. But I think we have to go back to the foundations in the beginning of things, right? So I always deconstruct that. And I ask whoever I'm speaking with, so what was your mental fitness pathway like? How long did it take you to reach mental strength? How was that tested? What did you have to go through in order to actually build the resilience and that gritty edge that eventually led to mental toughness? And quite often it's a confronting conversation for any athlete or any coach or any leader to have, because at that point it dawns upon them that actually they're not really mentally tough. They're still in the process of mental fitness or building mental strength.
What does mental toughness mean to you, though, Zim? Like, you've worked with a lot of very high-performance athletes, leaders, whatever it might be. Can you define mental toughness? Like, what does that actually look like for you?
For me, mental toughness means that you've begun that journey of fitness and strength. You've weathered the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows. You've realized at points that rock bottom does in fact have a basement, and you found yourself there. And it's the ability to get up and climb back up to, whatever level you need to be so that you can keep going. And in fact, I have a firm belief that you very seldom can achieve mental toughness without going through extreme hardship, which is why I focus a lot on in inverted commas, failure. I think failures are where the most important lessons of our lives are learned. That's what we learn about ourselves. That's what we learn about each other in a team environment. So for me, mental toughness is having gone through the journey, through the process, not having woken up one morning thinking to yourself, I feel mentally tough to take on the world. So for me, mental toughness is having done the hard yards, ridden the ebbs and the flows, the highs and the lows, and being able to do a lot of soul searching when you're at the bottom, and then being humble enough to realize that you're on a pathway to success and that you've got all these skills and attributes and traits that will hold you in really good stead going forward. And for me, mental toughness is not just synonymous with a stereotypical tough person on the exterior. Mental toughness for me is a human being who's able to utilize skill sets that you can't see. They are invisible. They're part of their value system. They're part of their belief system, and they're part of their behavior system as well. And so I know that's a bit of a wordy way to get around it, but I don't think there's one word that sums up mental toughness. Some people might just go straight to resilience or grit, and to a degree they're correct. But that's my definition, Chris.
Yeah, it's cool. And it sounds like there's no way to sort of shortcut that process. You've got to go through the failures, back against the wall and sort of pick yourself up from that. How do you help high performers deal with failure? Because failure is something we all need to deal with at some point in time. If we're not failing, we're not learning and growing. That's pretty well publicized. But how do you go about working high performers through that process of failure and actually galvanizing themselves off the back of that?
Yeah, great question. So I use a lot of reframing. I try and move away from athletes, whether they're high performance or just at a high level, even in school competitive environments or executives. I really try and understand and reframe for them those moments when they thought they were just about to give up, or they thought, "What's the point?" And I refer to those moments as the lucky moments. And they sometimes look at me and they think, "What are you talking about? I wasn't selected to play for that Super Rugby team or that club, or I didn't make the cut. I couldn't go to the Olympics." And I go, "Well, how lucky are you that you had the opportunity to learn so much from that moment?" And they really question the way in which I reframe it, because I do try my hardest to prove to athletes and leaders that it is in those moments of hardship and disappointment where we can really allow ourselves to give ourselves to self-learning. That's where we learn the most about ourselves. So I'll reframe it. I'll say those lucky moments when you weren't selected, those fortunate times when you were overlooked, those memorable moments when you felt at your lowest. And I'll say to the athlete, well, I'll ask him, talk me through what went through your mind then. And now talk me through what would go through your mind today if the same thing were to happen. Because we've completely reframed how we look at failures in the context of building that resilience that takes you further.
So is it about being like really intentional as seeing that failure as a growth opportunity and a learning opportunity? Like, yeah, being very intentional with seeing the positive elements of that failure.
Absolutely. Let me give you an example, Chris. Your background is military, right? And so the military sometimes would see a loss or a defeat in that moment as a devastating blow, maybe even towards a nation's ego, right? But countries that have gone from conflict to conflict have learned the most in those moments of defeat. And that's what makes them even stronger further down the line. One superpower springs to mind. The United States has been in many conflicts around the world, haven't always been successful. But what makes them a really dominant force in military terms today? It's what they've learned through the times when they had to go back with their tail between their legs, when they weren't as successful in completing the mission the way they intended. And I think we can learn so much from those moments that we think define us and we don't quite get there. And we have to go back to the drawing board. It's that drawing board where we improve and we get better. And I think there's a lot to be said about being able to learn from those moments where we don't succeed.
Yeah, totally. And, going to tough moments and failures and all those types of things, what do you think is one of the first skills that a high performer would need to master? So, the first mental skill or mental tool that they could use to make them more effective in moments like that?
For me, that's an easy one to answer. I without a doubt, go straight to self awareness. I'll tell you why, Chris. If you can develop your self awareness to the point where it gives you automatic access to the control room, the control center, which is your brain. Once you are self-aware enough, you get access to that control center where you can dial things up, you can dial things down. And so quite often my starting point working with an athlete is to sense check where they are on a sliding scale of 0 to 10 with regards to their level of self-awareness. And once we can build on self-awareness to a point where they can then access that control center, it, it opens up so many opportunities. You may need to dial down certain emotions. You may need to dial up certain emotions and thoughts. And you can dial those things up and down far easier if your self-awareness is high. Because guess what happens? The ripple effect of self-awareness is self-control. And when those two things are put together, we get discipline. So I have this equation that I often refer to. High level of self-awareness plus a high level of self-control equals discipline. What do we need most when motivation drops? Discipline. So motivation is like, I call it in Australian terms, it's a Tim Tam at 3 o'clock. It's a sugar hit. It's that little biscuit you have 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It makes you feel like you can keep going. But motivation wins. It's up and it's down. That's where we need to rely on discipline.
Yeah, for sure. And we see that all the time, like people that need that rah rah, they need that speech to get them fired up, or, they've got to listen to that podcast or watch that motivational video to get them going. But oftentimes it's around doing the thing that we know we need to do, even when we can't be bothered doing it, eh? And
That's it.
that's the tough part.
It
Yeah.
is the tough part. And again, I welcome I welcome those moments. Sometimes I'm called a sadist by the clients that I work with because I go, how wonderful is this? You came last or you weren't picked, but wow, we've got so much to work on now. Let's get it journaled. Let's get it put pen to paper. Let's be in the moment. And those are the opportunities I look for. But definitely to answer your question, self-awareness without a doubt is my starting point.
Yeah, that's cool. We see that on a lot of leadership courses within the military context and stuff. In the early stages of people's careers, it's that technical skill set that makes them successful. Can they do their job well, whatever that might be. But as they start to move through the more senior levels of leadership, it's around how well do you know yourself? How well do you know how you react in pressure situations? How good are your intrapersonal skills, the way that you deal with other people? Those are like the differences between the people that do really well and the people that maybe get left behind a little more in that sort of technical type space.
I'd 100% agree with that, Chris. Yeah,
Mm.
for sure.
So I'm real curious around when you're working with these high performers and things, we talk about habits, rituals, routines, and stuff. What types of habits are you seeing from these top performers that allows them to execute so well on game day?
Well, to execute so well, the habits are they're self-aware of what their strengths are. They are able to accentuate those strengths, almost turning them into shields, shields that block out the opposite of what that strength may be. And again, they develop those strengths so much so that if they have any conflicting areas that need to be developed, some might call them weaknesses. I call them kryptonite because I love the old Superman movies. So I refer to athletes of having strengths and kryptonite. We can sometimes bypass the kryptonite if our strengths are overwhelmingly strong. The kryptonite may not even be of impact. So those are really common traits I see with athletes that are reaching those higher levels of performance. The other thing that I think is really evident is that the athletes that go the furthest are the athletes that train their brains just as much as they train their bodies. And for me, and I know that as a mindset coach, obviously I'm going to be promoting mental skills in sports, but I do find that those that go further um, have without a doubt placed a huge amount of emphasis on their mindset coaching and their mindset training. I've had former All Blacks captain Kieran Reid on one of my talks, and Kieran speaks about the importance of what gets not just him but the All Blacks under the mindset coaching of Gilbert Inoka. It was such an important part of developing what was it, 10 years, a decade of dominance. And they worked just as much on their mindset as they did on their technical and tactical skills. So athletes that embrace mental skills, develop their mind, spend a lot of time on their mind, they are often the ones that are consistently performing and dominating at the top.
So, getting into the granular now, we're talking about mental skills and all of those types of things, but what types of tools or practical strategies might someone at the top of their game be using? So, I know we probably don't want to dive into specifics for individuals because that's very personal, but
Yes.
what types of tools or techniques might you see being employed by these one percenters, let's call them the best of the best?
Sure. So one of the tools that I find is most effective, for example, I'm working with a female tennis player. She just competed in the Australian Open, and whilst she didn't progress to the finals or semi-finals, what we were able to go away at the end of this tournament was we were able to sit down and re-evaluate what those strengths and what those kryptonites are, because they change as a player progresses. And so what we do is we try and find what are the core five strengths that an athlete has. How do those five strengths relate to, if it's a team sport, the rest of the team as a collective? So you might have an individual who's one of their core strengths is controlled aggression. Well, that's not going to be very useful in a team where the rest of the team is not using controlled aggression at all. So we have to sometimes, at a granular level, you use that word, we need to sometimes bridge those gaps. So if it's a team sport, it might be a personal value. Does it align with the team's value? Sometimes we have to bridge that gap. It could be an inherent behavior of an athlete at a personal level. It might be their strength. If it's not aligning with the rest of the teams, we have to bridge that gap. But coming back to the tennis player, we go back to reevaluating our 5 core strengths and identifying our 5 kryptonites. And then at times we even come up with 5 words or traits or behaviors that we know can squash the kryptonite. And so then when that athlete goes into the next tournament, plays against the same opponent who knocked her out in the Australian Open, we can see how she's improved, how she's been able to adapt mentally, physically, tactically, technically, in all areas of the game. And so I think that is a very effective way of achieving it.
So, these areas of strength and the kryptonites, to use your words, I really like that. It's a nice distinctive way to think about it. How do you identify those clearly? Is that self-reported, or is that other people's perspective? How do you go about it? Because sometimes we really struggle to give ourselves credit for the things we're good at, and we're overcritical.
Yes.
So how do we get a well-rounded category, I guess?
You're speaking my language of love here. So what we do is we ask the athlete to complete a very simple 1-page exercise where they self-evaluate themselves. We then, in the case of this tennis player, we then go to her strength and conditioning coach, her 2 tennis coaches, her nutritionist, her physio. We go to her parents. We go to people, in her circle, and we ask them to complete the same sheet.
360-degree feedback, basically.
Yeah. Basically, it is a form of 360-degree feedback. And so what we then do is we can say to that athlete, look, so you've self-identified your core 5 strengths as being these. And we can then match that up with most of her support, her coaching staff, what they think. And we can see where there's big anomalies. And we can, again, help work on self-awareness to go, are you even aware that everyone else sees this as a core strength of yours, but you haven't even put it down as one of your 5? And then we do the same with the kryptonites. More often than not, the kryptonites are very evident to see. And so there's a lot of alignment on that in a 360 kind of evaluation. It's the strengths, surprisingly enough, where the athlete might see their strengths as very differently to what their support or their coaching staff would see. And
Why
I
do you
love
why do you think
connecting
that
those.
is then?
Again, it comes down to self-awareness, and it comes down to maybe a strength and conditioning coach not understanding the technical side of a game. That's not their job to do so. But when asked to do so, that's what they see. That's what they see through their lens of that athlete. And I really, when I present the findings back to the whole group, I really make sure to make everyone feel that this is valuable information. There's no right or wrong answer. Your opinion is your opinion. And so we can challenge opinions, but at the end of the day, it's how you feel about what you see, and it's how you feel about who you are. So I love then if you've got a big overlap of strengths, I go, how wonderful is it that actually the athlete may not even realize that these strengths are visible. And where there's kryptonites, as I said earlier on, more often than not, there's a strong alignment there because those are very visible to see. It could just be body language, maybe poor. It might be that they lose concentration, that they don't have that ability to stay in the game when they're 2 sets down. So those are things that are quite evident.
Yeah. And do you find like these people you're working with, they're really surprised around the amount of things that different people in their circle notice? I've seen that with working with military leaders, or even with myself with Hogan's or 360 or whatever it might be, where I was actually really surprised with the things that people picked up about me. I was like, no one's ever going to notice that, but those behaviors seem to be really obvious to people. Do you find that with the high performers as well?
Absolutely. Don't forget, high performers don't see success as a destination. For them, it's a continuous, it's like a loop. There is no beginning, there is no end. because even when they get to the top of their game, then we talk about, was that a one-hit wonder, or are we going to continue to go back to back? So when you're presenting information to someone that might surprise them, we always refer to that as gold nuggets. We go, this is absolute gold, because even when you win this Grand Slam, we know you're going to want to go after the next Grand Slam. So all these nuggets of gold are what we're going to build together into what will eventually be a superpower that will then give them the ability to think positively, think long term, build that resilience. As I say, build towards mental toughness. I think very few athletes are truly mentally tough. I do believe that. I think most are mentally strong, which is why there's always a work on. But yeah, I think that the more surprised they are, the more we reframe it as nuggets of gold.
Hey, what's up, guys? Just a quick note to say, hopefully you're enjoying the show. If you are, feel free to like and subscribe, and you can share it with your mates. You can also find us at LinkedIn and on Facebook, or check us out at www.aegisleadership.co.nz. Cool, that's all from me. Let's get back to the show. Something I just thought about now, it's like I was one of those kids where my parents took me to Disneyland when I was young, extremely lucky. But we were going to Disneyland, and I was that kid who was asking, what are we having for lunch? As we're walking through the gates to Disneyland, like really struggling to just be present and enjoy the moment. And I heard something similar with Scotty Scheffler. He said he enjoys a major win for like 15 minutes, right? Or something like that. Don't quote me on it. And then he's already thinking about the process, the next practice session, the next tournament, like really struggling just to enjoy the moment or the satisfaction of achieving what you had set out to achieve. How do you help them do that? That's something I would love to be able to do better myself.
Yeah, I've got a very simple saying. Look, Chris, my style of coaching is I like to keep things really, really simple. I think we've all got a lot going on in our heads. We all lead busy lives. You and I have used that word busy before.
I actually hate it now that I think about it.
So I use the phrase, wherever your feet are, be present. And what that means is that coach or that athlete who's just won a championship, if you're still out on the footy field or you in the sporting arena, your feet are there, so be present, enjoy the win, celebrate it. You've worked hard for it. Then when it's time to go back to the drawing board, be present in that environment. Don't let your mind wander back to 2 days prior to when you were winning the cup. So wherever your feet are, be present. And that's really important for executives in leadership roles as well. And even high school athletes that I coach, when you are in the classroom or when you are in a workplace environment, wherever your feet are, be present. So be mentally and physically present there. But when you are at home and you're sitting around the dinner table, don't be thinking about the sporting arena or don't be thinking about the office. Wherever your feet are, be present. And it's something as simple as that I then pause when I'm presenting that in leadership talks or in sporting environments. I then have to pause because people need to reflect upon their own behaviors. They need to go, wow, often I'm in the classroom thinking about Saturday's game, or often I'm in the office, I'm thinking about playing golf tomorrow. You're not on the golf course yet. So your feet are firmly underneath your work desk. That's where you need to be mentally present. And I think that's where we sometimes get caught up in this whole concept of work-life balance. I think we can handle that far easier if we just adopt a very simple thought process of wherever our feet are, we should be present.
Yeah, I really like that. And I've spoken about it with other guests and things, that temptation when you're at the dinner table with your kids or, you're having family time, being able to sort of acknowledge that voice in your head, like, oh, that email you need to send or that message you need to reply to or that post you need to put up on LinkedIn. Sometimes it's easier said than done, isn't it? To just be able to park that to one side and like you say, be where your feet are.
And Chris, if we go back 10 minutes ago into this conversation, I gave you a formula which said high level of self-awareness plus high level of self-control gives you the discipline not to reach for that phone, gives you the discipline to be, and also, we want our kids and our work colleagues and our teammates to register that we're present there in the moment. So if it's at home, we want our kids will probably only see us for a fraction of any given day. The rest of the time, either they are at school or we are at work or their sleep time. So those minutes, and I say minutes because sometimes it is only minutes, those minutes are to be treasured, right? And so we shouldn't be compromising our values by, as you say, just doing that quick last minute post because it popped into our heads at the moment. So we have to have the discipline to, and I need to take my own advice, because if my wife's listening to this podcast, she'll go, "Hey, take your own advice, Zim."
When she listens to it, Zim.
Yes, exactly. She will, trust me.
Nice. How do you get more present?
How do you get more present? I think it's something that has to be a conscious decision. You make a decision. It's not a feeling, it's a decision. And I think we need to practice that, like any skill, like you would any trait or any behavior. It does need to be practiced. So I think we need to make a decision that we are going to be present. And if we have to schedule it in, schedule it in. Some people try and schedule every minute of every day to within an inch of itself. I operate in a more fluid world. I have to, for certain reasons, I have to be fluid. A lot of my time is working at different hours because my clients are all over the world, which gives me flexibility sometimes during the day to be present and do things that I normally wouldn't be able to do. Spend time with my wife, or read a book, or go down for a swim. I think it's really important to schedule that.
Yeah. And speaking with a lot of psychologists or clinical psychologists, they talk about the wise mind state, that ability to be able to calm the nervous system and everything that goes with that, being able to slow down, gain strategic self awareness, whatever you want to call it, make more mindful and well rounded and well reasoned decisions. So, yeah, really interesting one. What's the best way to re engage and reset after a critical failure? So, we're using the sporting context a little bit here. You might have a rugby player, for example. I know that's your wheelhouse. They might knock on or drop the ball at a critical moment during a match. How do they reset and re engage after that and continue to perform?
That's a really interesting one. So if we talk, let's use rugby as a good example. I have regular catch ups with the Wallabies coach Joe Schmidt, and I'll never forget how he put me in my place once. I was working with some super rugby players, and I would say to them, if you make a mistake, you've literally got 2 or 3 seconds to chuck it in the bucket and move on. Otherwise, the game moves on without you. And at that moment, I'll never forget, Joe stopped me and he said, "Zim, I have to correct you." He said, when I was coaching Ireland, we had some of the top sports psychologists came in and presented to us the concept of how to overcome a mistake in the middle of a high intensity environment. And he said to me that the psychologist revealed something to all the Irish players, that the brain registers a fault or a mistake in zero point 0.4 of a second on average, right? So we as a team decided we were going to give ourselves the rest of that second to dwell on the mistake. In other words, we were gonna give ourselves zero point 0.6 of a second to to mull over the error that we've just made. He said, because anything longer than that, a lot can happen in 1 second in a game of rugby. A kick, a tackle, a missed kick, a missed tackle. Anything can happen. A second's a long time when you're in the middle of a set piece that needs to be to 1/100th of a second correct. And I learned a lot from Joe in that very moment. And I had to go back to all of my client bases and re-establish the thought process of how to keep yourself in the moment, even though you've made a mistake. There's nothing you can do. It's in your rearview mirror from that moment onwards. So your brain registers it, then you can dwell on it for that zero point 0.6 of a second, but you have to keep playing on because the game is going on without you otherwise.
So, is it just about giving yourself a little bit of time to dwell on it, have a bit of a pity party, and then the ability to flush it quickly and
That's it.
reset and move on?
That's it. And we talked about tennis earlier. I think Roger Federer, when he announced his retirement, he gave an outstanding speech at a university, and he said there's a little known fact about his decade long um, being number one in the world at tennis. Little known fact, he won over 80% of his professional matches, but he only ever won 55% of his shots in a game. He said, "Do you honestly think that every single time I missed a shot and dwelled on it, I would have the moment to dwell on it?" He goes, "I lost 45% of my shots over a 10-year career." He goes, "For me, I was just focused on the next shot, the next shot, the next shot." And it's incredible how people's minds shift in a positive way when you can share stories like that and say, Roger Federer, 45% of the time was losing his shots. He was world champion for 10 years. So you're going to drop a ball and you're going to miss a kick. That's okay. You got next kicks around the corner. That's the one we have to focus on.
And I guess we put these people on a pedestal and we just expect their performance to be flawless, but it's not, right? It's riddled with mistakes, errors. It's more their ability to overcome that quickly and move on and just accept it. Eh?
That's it. And you know, I do ban certain words in the coaching environments I'm with. We don't refer to an error as a mistake. We refer to it as a learning. So what did you just learn there? So in a training environment, I would encourage the coach to pause for a moment and say, what did we all just learn there? The person who dropped the ball, did they drop the ball because the person who was throwing the pass was out of time? Was the communication clear that the ball was going in that direction? So what did we as a team learn? It's not about the person that dropped the ball. It's about the whole team's execution. And so we have to move from this me to a we mindset in a team sport. And even in an individual sport, we have to still reflect on the we as the collective coaching group that has helped that person to be in that individual moment.
Last thing I want to really dive into is around fear. Fear is something we all face probably, unless we're a psychopath. How should we deal with fear? Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of being found out as being an imposter, probably things that everyone relates to varying degrees. How should we deal with fear, Zim?
I think most people associate fear with performance anxiety. And then if you really start to scratch beneath the surface of that, the performance anxiety is either coming from an expectation of having to meet, someone else's expectation. It could be a coach or teammates, could be people on the sideline. So I deconstruct fear. I want to understand, are we using the right word, the right terminology? Are we genuinely experiencing fear, or are we just calling it fear? Sometimes, more often than not, is coming from a point of anxiety, performance anxiety. And then I ask a question. I go, how well have you prepared for this moment? Because when your preparation is high, anxiety goes low. And when your preparation is low, anxiety should, in that instance, go high. So I think Simon Sinek, most people have heard of Simon Sinek. He's got a great segment where he explains that performance anxiety and excitement present themselves physiologically almost in the identical way. Our heart rate goes up, our breathing gets a little bit elevated. We sometimes get butterflies in our tummy, and we might get kind of like sweaty palms, right? I've just described someone who might be excited, and I've just
Yes.
described someone who might in that moment be anxious. So then I bring it back to the question is, how was our preparation? If our preparation was really good, then I can tell you right now, physiologically, you're experiencing excitement. So let's call it what it is. If you have not prepared well, I'm sorry, well, then you have every right to feel anxiety. If you've had weeks and weeks and weeks to practice a certain song on the piano and you haven't been practicing and the curtain's about to go up and you're about to play in front of an audience, then that's fear. That's genuine fear of failure. And you are going to fail because you haven't put the effort in to train. So I think fear and failure are two words that go hand in hand. I think, again, we've kind of gone on a bit of a cycle here. I think there's great lessons in failure, right? But I do think that more often than not, I think fear and anxiety tend to go hand in hand. And that's at that moment when our coach leaders and our coach high performance athletes to figure out where it stems from and to call it the right word, right?
Yeah. I love that free frame around same physiological response between anxiety and excitement. And I guess there's that old saying, I can't remember the exact words for it, but if you don't do the reps in the shadows, you get found out under the light, say that boxing analogy. And
That's
I
true.
think that's a great way to think about it.
That is very true.
Advice to somebody who wants to level themselves up. So, one piece of advice you could give, it could be an athlete, it could be a leader, someone who just wants to perform to a higher standard. What's one piece of advice you would give to them?
One piece of advice, even if you're not working with a mindset coach, or if you don't have access to a mental skills coach or a performance coach, invest the time in yourself to access that space. You'll be so surprised what you learn about yourself, what you learn about each other. There's so much resource out there online and in great books, great podcasts. And I think if you invest in your mental training like you would be investing in your own fitness, you'll see it pays huge dividends, and you will reap the rewards for it. So that's my piece of advice always to anyone is make sure you're allocating time and you're investing in your mindset.
Yeah, awesome. And no doubt there's going to be a lot of people out there that this has landed with Zim. And what's the best way for somebody to find you, or how can they reach out to you?
Sure. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. I've got a website, OTM Coaching, which stands for On the Mark, otmcoaching.com.au, and anyone can reach me that way. And I also refer a lot of people to other mindset coaches that are dotted around the country and around the world that we've connected with. So it doesn't have to just be me. We are very selfless people, I like to think. We just like to pair you up with the right person that can help you on that journey.
Awesome. Hey, Mark Zimmermann, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And I really enjoyed the chat.
I really enjoyed it too. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
Good. And if you found that helpful, guys, you can like and subscribe, or you can check us out at www.aegisleadership.co.nz. That's us. Catch you later.